In this lab, we're going to learn about how to measure the mass of objects on a balance. So let's start by looking at the best techniques to use when using a balance.
Here we have a top-loading balance. This one has a wind cover on it that we can lift up and get out of the way. You can see that in this case, this balance is not reading 0. So we can push this 0 or tare button. The balance then reads 0. We can then take the object that we want to weigh and place that on the balance pan. Now, best practice, if you're going to weigh into a beaker such as this, is to record this mass in your lab notebook so that you know what this mass is later. You could alternately press the 0 button again, or the tare button, to zero out the balance, to tare the balance, and that will now be displaying 0. And at this point now we can remove the beaker from the balance pan, place an object into the beaker, and put the beaker back on the balance pan. That then will tell us only the mass of the object that we've placed in the beaker. Now this may be appropriate, but it may be that you need to know the mass of the beaker and the object, and so you may need to know the mass of the beaker to subtract it from the mass of the beaker plus the object. And this may happen if it's going to be a significant length of time between when you may measure the mass of the beaker empty and when you would measure the mass of the beaker when there's something in it. Now, suppose that we want to dispense some solid chemical into our beaker. You don't want to dispense of the chemical directly into the beaker on the balance pan. You want to remove the beaker from the balance pan, get it away from the balance, dispense in using your scupula, put the beaker back onto the balance pan, look at the mass. If it's not enough, then repeat, remove, and again, you don't want it sitting immediately next to the balance. You want to bring it away a ways, dispense into it again, and put it back. Continue doing that until you have dispensed the appropriate quantity. If you have spilled onto the balance, you may need to use the balance brush to clean off the balance. You may need to clean the balance pan, and you may also need to clean the area around the balance pan. Now in this case, I have wiped non-existent material onto the lab bench, and at that point then I would need to clean up the lab bench and wipe that into the trash can or into an appropriate waste receptacle. As you're dispensing chemical, if you have dispensed something into your beaker, anything that was in the beaker is now potentially contaminating that chemical, so you cannot put it back into the stock bottle. Also, if the object that you want to weigh is warm, do not place it on the balance pan. You must let it get to room temperature and then put it on the balance pan. This is for two reasons. One, if the object is hot, obviously it can transmit that heat into the balance pan and damage the inner workings of the balance, but also it will set up convection currents around the hot object because hot air rises, and that wind will push up on both the balance pan and on the object and will change the apparent mass of the object.
Now in this experiment, you're going to be measuring the masses of some objects that I give you in a baggie. There will be a number on that baggie. Make sure you write that number down. Inside that bag, there are various objects. We have a rubber stopper, a scupula, and some aluminum shavings inside a glass vial. Now, we only want the mass of those aluminum shavings. We don't want the mass of the vial. This means that you'll need to take special care to transfer the aluminum shavings out of the vial into the beaker that you're measuring in, and then carefully transferring those aluminum shavings back into the vial. You're going to have to transfer those shavings a few times. Now, my recommendation is to use the scupula, either the one from your drawer or the one included in the baggie, to transfer the aluminum shavings from the vial into the beaker and then back from the beaker into the vial again. You don't want to lose any of those aluminum shavings, or your masses of those aluminum shavings will change.